This video is brought to you by Nebula.
Last Thursday, England voted in the 2024 local elections, with a major twist. This year, 3 brand new Metro Mayor positions were up for grabs under new devolution deals, and next year there'll be 4 more. This means that after May 2025, over half of England's population will live in an area covered by devolution deals, equating to 57% of its economic output. So in this video, we'll take a look at the history of devolution in England, why it's currently on the rise, and what this might lead to next. But first, let's explain what we mean by devolution. When we say devolution, we mean the transfer of powers away from central government in Westminster to local government elsewhere. There's lots of different forms of devolution, but in this video we'll focus mainly on devolution through Metro Mayors, who run what's called mayoral combined authorities. Now the map on screen highlights the 10 pre-existing mayoral combined authorities in England, plus the 3 brand new MCAs and the 4 to be created in 2025. While most of these are metropolitan areas, the government is now also devolving powers to rural areas too, and promised in its 2022 Levelling Up white paper that, by 2030, every part of England that wants one will have a devolution deal. So to understand how this has all come about, we've got to go back to the late 90s. In 1998, under the Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair, the UK government devolved executive and legislative powers to each of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland through national parliaments. Around the same time, it also held a successful referendum in London, which created England's first regional combined authority and Metro Mayor in 1999. However, the idea of devolution to England's other regions wasn't gaining much traction. The then Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott proposed a new regional policy with more devolution, but it lacked wider backing within the Labour Party, and ultimately led to a failed referendum in the North East in 2004, in which 78% of people voted against a regional assembly. After this, regional devolution in England basically sank into the background. The major turning point came in November 2014, when the UK government announced its first devolution deal with the combined authority of Greater Manchester, followed by a more limited deal with Cornwall in 2015. Since then, England has seen a steady rise in mayoral combined authorities, which were created in 9 more regions between 2015 and 2019, and will cover another 7 by 2025. So now let's move on to why devolution is on the rise in England. Well, its advocates argue that local devolution can lead to better policy making, better economic and social outcomes, and improved democracy. So the first argument for devolution in England is that it often leads to better policy making. Local leaders and metro mayors know their areas far better than cabinet ministers based in Westminster, and can make better informed decisions on spending priorities. They can also take a longer-term approach than Westminster MPs, who are subject to the so-called ministerial merry-go-round that often leads to delays, changes, and ultimately higher costs on projects, or even outright cancellation, like with the northern leg of HS2. Anyway, a great example of strong local policy making is Greater Manchester's investment in public transport. Along with other English cities like Leeds and Liverpool, Manchester's economic development has been held back partly by inadequate local transport infrastructure, with a House of Lords committee report in 2022 noting that poor public transport in big cities diminishes the agglomeration benefits and, by extension, their productivity and economic performance. Under Metro Mayor Andy Burnham, the city has introduced a new and effective London-style public transport network called the B Network, made up of franchised electric buses, cycle lanes and trams, with 8 new commuter rail lines to be added by 2030. Now, the next reason for regional devolution is it can improve economic and social outcomes. Devolution encourages integration between councils and local authorities, so that the key drivers of economic growth, that's transport, skills, housing and planning, are better aligned. In the 10 years since its first devolution deal with the government, Greater Manchester has seen steady improvements in the local economy, industrial growth and the creation of new jobs. Between 2013 and 2023, Manchester's employment rate rose more than 10 percentage points to 74%, while the overall UK employment rate in the same period stayed flat. Similarly, Birmingham's tech sector is booming thanks to more investment from West Midlands Mayor Andy Street, growing by an average of 7.6% a year between 2014 and 2020, the fastest in the UK. Moreover, employment opportunities in Birmingham in tech and science grew by 55% in the decade up to 2020, and are forecast to grow further in future. Finally, devolution also improves participation and trust in democracy. Metro mayors generally enjoy far higher approval ratings within their own regions than MPs do at the national level, suggesting that local expertise is valued. For instance, an Ipsos poll ahead of the mayoral elections last week showed 59% of Mancunians had a favourable view of Burnham, compared to just 15% with an unfavourable view, and 34% of people in the West Midlands had a favourable view of Mayor Andy Street, compared to 18% unfavourable. These numbers are far higher than typical public approval towards the UK's national politicians, which rarely exceeds 30%. So with devolution on the rise in England, what might happen next? Well, the most likely outcome in the near future seems to be more devolution, for example through new funding arrangements. Greater Manchester and the West Midlands have both recently signed new trailblazer deals with the government, which will see them move to single settlement funding that's more similar to the single block grant that's given to Scotland and Wales. Essentially, this means that funding will be allocated based on social factors and levels of need, similar to the way EU funding used to be allocated to deprived areas pre-Brexit. The UK Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has also indicated that the single settlement deal should be available to all combined authorities in time. Liverpool has already thrown its hat in the ring to be next in line, and the mayors of West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire have also reportedly requested deeper devolution deals too. Another future possibility is indirect devolution through parliamentary or electoral reforms. Metro mayors like Manchester's Burnham and Liverpool's Steve Rotherham are proponents of banning the whip system used in Parliament, which essentially forces MPs to toe the party line or risk expulsion. They argue that with the whip system, the power given to elected politicians basically evaporates the second they set foot in Parliament, disconnecting them from their constituents and forcing MPs to vote for things they don't believe in. They also argue that a shift to proportional representation, rather than the current system of first-past-the-post voting, would empower places and remove the public funding skew which favours London and the South East. Ultimately, though, it's still early days for English devolution, and we'll have to wait and see if it pays off everywhere. Regardless, a trend is certainly underway towards more widespread and deeper devolution, and the success of Greater Manchester's experiment over the last decade does seem to offer an optimistic model for England's other city regions going forward.
There's definitely going to be some new developments with this story though, so keep an eye out for future developments. Anyway, the best way to stay on top of the news is with Nebula News. If you haven't heard, we've launched a project alongside our partners at Nebula called Nebula News, where every day the TLDR team curates a selection of videos that matter most in the world right now. As you surely already know, Nebula is the thoughtful streaming service that's pushing boundaries on what independent creators can do with their content, including Nebula News, where we handpick a feed of content which should help you keep up to date with everything you need to know to sound smart and be truly informed. We believe that in a confusing and overwhelming news environment, knowing what to pay attention to is important. You can't track every story, so our curation should help to surface what really matters, showing you videos from TLDR and other superb creators that help you understand the world around you quickly and easily. It's not just curated news content brought to you directly by us. Nebula also features loads of exclusive original content. That's things like Real Life Law's brand new series War Room, which every month runs you through a whole load of ongoing conflicts to keep you in the loop. You can also watch every TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in many instances before they land on YouTube. Now, if you've already subscribed to Nebula, you can find the brand new Nebula News section at nebula.tv/news. And be sure to bookmark or save that link so you can use it as your TLDR-ified news homepage. If you're not a member already, then click the link in the description to sign up now. If you do, you'll get 40% off an annual plan by using our link. That's less than £2 a month. Plus, Nebula will know that you came from us, which really helps us out. We've got some really great feedback from existing members, so I hope you enjoy all the effort we're going to with Nebula News.